Welcome back to another episode inside of our Hyrox Performance series. Now, something I want to talk about today is approaching competitions and how that should look for a Hyrox athlete. So essentially what we need to be thinking about is training macro cycles, training micro cycles, but inside of that is actually understanding what accumulation phase of training is and what intensification phase of training is. Now, if you have a CrossFit background, you might be familiar with these terms, but if you're a Hyrox competitor, then you might actually not be quite used to these terms. So I want to teach you a little bit right now about how these training phases work and where they align with your actual competition or your season, okay? So what we need to think about right now is accumulation phases of training and intensification phases of training are inside of macro cycles. Now, where this relates to in regards to being a Hyrox competitor is you need to be really clear on what you're actually doing inside of these phases and how to maximize your growth and your performance when it comes to these two phases. Now, I want to try and demonstrate now, if you are doing your own training, about what to include in each of these phases, where exactly they should be, and what actually happens inside of those phases when it comes to your growth and peaking in time for your competition. This is what we need to remember, is all of this is about peaking at the right time, something that not many Hyrox competitors will do. So when we take the accumulation phase of training, what we need to understand is that the volume is really, really high. Okay, so in an accumulation phase, our volume starts very, very high. Now, as we go through that accumulation phase and into the intensification phase, the volume starts to lower. Okay, so an intensification phase is your phase before your competition. Okay, so this may be a little bit further out from competition. Your intensification phase is as you're approaching your competition, and this is when the volume will start coming down. However, inside the accumulation phase, we want to be looking at low to moderate intensity. So with most Hyrox competitors, let's take the pre-season, for example, over the summer, if you're in the UK, what we will find is that our intensity is very sort of low to moderate. So we might be working on VO2 max, building our zone 2 training, okay? Improving strength. So these things are going to be quite low intensity, but our volume is going to be very high. So we could be training, 6 times a week, 7 times a week with this, very, very frequent, bigger, longer sessions, okay? As we start to enter the intensification phase, we become much more sport specific, okay? So what we might find is this might be 16 weeks out from a competition. There's no reason why we should be demanding burpees and wall balls and things like that so early on in this accumulation phase, okay? But as we start to enter the intensification phase, this is when we then start becoming much more sport specific with the work, okay? So as we start to actually peak for competition, this is where our wall balls, our compromised sled work, all of that stuff is going to come in, which is more skill related, okay? Now this here in the accumulation phase, we are aiming for increased volume, lower to moderate intensity, okay? Now in between these two phases here, you might have a deload period, okay? So in between the two phases, you definitely want to pull the body back. You're probably looking at about a week to 10 days, especially inside of our Hyrox coaching programs. And then the intensification phase is actually going to be shorter than the accumulation phase, okay? So because you're working low to moderate intensity here, yes, the volume is high, but the body is essentially going through adaptations, but much slower, okay? So you can get away with this being a bit of a longer phase of training. The intensification phase is going to be a little bit shorter. Might be looking at maybe like 5 to 6 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. And this is going to be your peak phase into the competition. You'll have your taper week here at the end of your intensification, which will lead into your competition, okay? So I'm going to talk now about what should be actually included inside of these two phases in the next episode, okay? But this is how it should be looking. We want to kind of repeat this strategy between events as well to then sort of build. If we know that our running is something we need to improve, then there's no point going and booking an event in 4 weeks time. We'd actually be better booking one in 4 months time and then actually taking ourselves through a structured training process, all right? So into the next episode, I'm going to talk about what to include in both of these phases. But for now, hit the link below if you need anything in regards to structure or joining any of our programs from the Perform to the Compete, depending on where you are in your Hyrox journey. I'll see you there.